Hello everyone, welcome to Homemaking Radio. Please click the link in the description box and go to the place where I have embedded this video so that you can see the rest of the story. These videos are only for my blog, and I do write on it, and I do have other things that you might like to have there. Sometimes I might include a recipe or something that I have read to you, and some quotes, and I try to leave the scriptures that I've used if I have used any. And so to start out with, this is created for those of you who just want something to listen to. And I have my favorite things. I usually choose a book. My idea was to choose a way to teach as you go, or to just talk for people who needed to get something done and needed a little company without having to stop and look at how something is made or how something is cleaned. That's for another time. So today I'm going to start out, as I usually do, with making sure that you have been bathed and got dressed, because there is your fresh new start. Everything is new. Remember Mrs. Hamley saying to Molly, there, you can make all well tomorrow. And so this is tomorrow. And I remember reading some goofy little poem to you not long ago about explaining to a child what tomorrow is. And it was so funny, because today is tomorrow from yesterday. And make sure you dress as well as you can. I have had ladies in my ladies class that come once a week that tell me that they have decided that they are going to wear something pretty here when they come here for the afternoon tea and the ladies class, and how good it makes them feel. So be a scientist, take notes, take note of the mood and of the way that the day goes and of the feeling that you get of its wonderful specialness. Every day is such a wonderful gift, and you should be knowing this from the time you are young, that we cannot while away the time without that awareness that God is good and that He is in our lives, and that we owe it to Him to do the best we can. And so to dress up is to say, my house is important to me, my family is important to me enough for them to see me. When we were growing up, it was in the 1950s, and a lot of women were struggling with having one car and having to take their husband to work and get the children off to school. And so they often got caught in their slippers and bathrobes because they just were in the car. No one would see them, and it became a bad habit to stop at the grocery store on the way home in whatever they were wearing, curlers, whatever. And so people that were in the know and that were more into etiquette all over the place were writing articles in magazines to help these women to start their day off looking better so that they would be presentable. And so we have to be careful. Someone said in our class yesterday how we have to be careful of the reaction we're causing in people and the way that we're making people think and what we're making them think of. So are they going to think of youthfulness and a pretty spring day, or are they going to think of some kind of dreary event when they see you? So even if you're just, quote, just at home, actually that's the finest place to be. But even if you're at home, I think it's very important to give it the respect that it needs, because it is the place where you are helping to define the future of other people. You are determining an atmosphere, and we'll talk a lot about the physical atmosphere and the spiritual atmosphere later on in this lesson. And so for the homemaking part, now you're all ready. Let's get some things done. And for the homemaking part, now some people like to make sure that that front room, the room that someone is going to see the minute they walk in the door, even unexpectedly, that room at least isn't scary, and that you won't be scared if someone comes in. So get that room cleaned up and just do a walkthrough. Just walk through, look around, and if you want to, start dividing things. If it looks like it's overwhelming, if it looks complicated, just look at the different things. Books, papers, toys, clothing, fabric type things, dishes, tools, anything that you have in there, take them out by category. And when you start doing that, it just becomes so much simpler. Pick up all the books that you can find, and if you don't feel like you can put them away right away, at least put them in a container. I was at Hobby Lobby the other day, and they have some very high quality containers that look nice, and you can get them to match your decor at home, and you just put things in them. And I use them for my sewing projects, and I've got one that's just for what I bring to this class here, and I'll show you one of them here. This is one right here, and they come in aqua, and they come in black and brown and blue and orange and just greens, all different kinds of greens. And I use them for sorting things, and for projects that I want to finish, I'll put in here, or maybe books that I want to read, or put my recent publications that came in the mail in here that I want to read, and sit them down beside my chair, or just as long as they are not out on their own and everything's corralled in one place. So that's what I would say is, and also this is something you can teach the children when they attack a job, when they handle a job, that just, where do you start? You start first with a category, and you pick up everything from that category, and then you go to another category, papers, any kind of pens, pencils, crayons, and then you go to toys, and then you let's go to clothing. Now let's go to blankets and cushions and things made of cloth, and just any other type of thing. And for bedrooms, right now I'm still talking about the front room, but some people just like to totally clean off the seating areas, get those all straightened out, and then start picking things up. It just depends on what you want to do. Everybody has their own style, and you can develop your own style as you go. I talked a lot yesterday about the hope chest, and about being young people, learning to behave like young people, to be young, to do young things. And so today I hope to elaborate on that a little bit more. And I do want to write a little bit more about the atmosphere of the home, the what I would call it, the weather type atmosphere, or just the feeling that you get in the home, and how much the way you take care of it creates that atmosphere. And as an example, my youngest little grandson, when his mother said that she had cleaned up one of the rooms, the living room, that he seemed to be less tense. And I think around us, if you'll look around and think back on days when maybe your family's had a little problem, or somebody's been fussy, that it might have been when people weren't properly dressed and when the house wasn't taken care of. And so they felt cranky when they got up. So it just really is important to wake up to a fresh new start, and let's give ourselves let's have the respect for ourselves. We are created in the image of God and by God, so why don't we have more respect for ourselves, so that we can wake up in the morning with an ability to start with a chance, instead of having to plow through yesterday's mistakes and yesterday's belongings all spread all over the place. Maybe we could start early in the day getting that cleaned up, so that the next day we don't have to face it. So I'll start today with and if you have anything that you need to do, you can get started on that while you listen. There isn't anything to see here. I will show you Eric Sloan's weather book, and I was just going to read the introduction of it in chapter 1. And I might be putting this one aside for a while because there are some other weather books that I've looked at. But this one for now, today, will tell you a lot about why you get certain feelings in the home or on your own property or area that you're in. And it's called The Human Side of the Weather. And in this little page, he talks about the difference between a professional meteorologist and a person who just observes and loves to learn about the weather. And it makes a lot of sense, so I'll read it to you. And I really think some of you people who are being homeschooled ought to start your own weather reporting business. It's apparently not hard to get the equipment and to broadcast the weather for your own area. You can just start a daily broadcast, either on podcast or video, and there you go. The weather is with us wherever we are. Yet nothing is more taken for granted than the daily drama of the sky. The heavens are a fairyland. Now I have to tell you, my mother used to take us outside on purpose to show us the clouds. And we got in the habit of laying on the berry bushes or the grass just to look at the clouds and to imagine what they looked like. This is a great way to show children how life is. You've got to show them what to see. You've got to show them about life. The heavens are a fairyland filled with marvels to anyone who opens his mind and spirit to them. Facts are often as inspiring as fancies, and what one sees aloft in the skies is as real as anything to be experienced on earth. Our heads are often bowed down with the material burdens of life, but we know that all through the ages, thinking people have found time to look upward and to seek peace and solace in the panorama of weather. Emerson called the sky the daily bread of his eyes. Ruskin called it almost human in its passions, almost spiritual in its tenderness, almost divine in its infinity. Lincoln said he could not imagine a man looking up at the sky and denying God. Now, you don't have to have all these famous poets and people that have been published. You can write something like this or talk about something like this and say, my mother used to say, my grandmother used to say, somebody in the church used to tell me this and that. So this, I think, is really important to know that we're every bit as important as these people that are quoted. It's just that we didn't get published and we didn't have a big backing behind us. But I think it's really important to rely on what you see and what has been told about it, and he does quote quite a bit of very valuable things here. These spiritual qualities of weather frequently outweigh the adverse influences that rain and snow have on our daily lives. They are, to my way of thinking, important enough to be a part of any book about the weather. This book may help the reader to learn how to forecast tomorrow's weather. More important, it is hoped the book will give to many a new concept of weather, that it will explain the character as well as the mechanics of the sky and the atmosphere. Not everyone can be a meteorologist, but it is easy to be weather-wise, and the pleasure of being close to the weather is endless. See, already, after reading this, I'm inspired to be happy about whatever the weather is. Maybe I can think something different about it when it's not to my liking. Anyone who has known a sailor with a weather eye, and who has also seen the inside of a weather bureau, knows the difference between being weather-wise and being meteorologically accurate. The meteorologist is a slave to the barrage of weather map material and mathematical data that bombards him from all over the world and keeps him from looking out of the window at the sky. On the other hand, a man with a weather eye wears his badge of wisdom gracefully. He has a ready alertness to cloud changes, or he has the calm assurance that tonight's rain will give way to a week of good weather. He has the gift of the upward glance, and his sky philosophy makes him a richer person. Many meteorologists, I feel sure, began their life work as sensitive children who responded to the thrill of clouds and wind, and who were awed by thunder and lightning. Once I, too, thought that research into atmospheric phenomena would be as exciting as a flight to the stars in a spaceship. But alas, the disappointment of finding that weather books were filled with the Latin names and graphs and algebraic equations was so great that it threatened to take the romance out of the skies forever for this weather student. The unscientific-looking picture, drawing 1, on the opposite page, will serve to set the pattern of this book of observations and sketches of the weather. Perhaps the views and findings presented here will provoke the truth of the wrath of some of the old school meteorologists, but the purpose is to arouse the interest of the newly weather-wise. This weather lore may not be infallible, but it will be interesting for the reader to match it up with official weather forecasts and try it out. Official forecasts, remember, are protected by the indefinite modifiers such as probable, possible, fair, mild, and while folklore about the weather usually comes out straight with the rainy, windy, clear, and so on, even though it's supposed to be folklore, it's really the opposite. Many of the weather sayings that have survived the years, those of the deceptive groundhog and goosebone type, have never for a moment been accepted by men whose reason demands an adequate cause for every effect, but there are other weather sayings which remain always true. In the course of modern living, man has lost much of his weather wisdom. What with air conditioning and improved travel facilities, we seem to go where we want and to do what we wish, regardless of the weather. Well, now, that's true, and I need to stop and comment on that, because this is one reason we're losing our sense of personal weather observation and feeling, and just the message that we get in our brains, that there's something going on or there's something different, is because we're following a social schedule or a travel schedule or just a work schedule that has nothing to do with weather. It just blocks it out. So he says, with air conditioning and improved travel facilities, we seem to go where we want, to do what we want, regardless of the weather. So it doesn't stop us from anything. Except for an occasional rained-out ball game or called-off sailing trip or postponed air flight, we presume that weather has very little influence on us, but it has far more influence on us than is immediately apparent. That is why I have told you for quite a few months that there is an atmosphere in the home that some people are a little spooked by because they don't quite understand it, and I called it the Stuffy house syndrome, but there's more to it than that. There is also the influence of the atmosphere outside that, of course, we have never paid attention to probably since we were children, and that's one of the things I want to include on how to be young if you're a young person, is watch the clouds, study the clouds, and know about weather and enjoy it while you're young, because you get busy when you're older and barely notice it. This is something you can fall back on when you're of a vital age. Now, there are quite a few weather books out there that you can buy that are very good. We live it. It says weather has far more influence on us than is immediately apparent. We live in it, breathe it, actually swim through an atmospheric sea from room to room, from place to place. I've often thought that there were some rooms that had a totally different atmospheric feel to it, if you wanted to call it weather, and it depended on whether it was the side that was facing east or west or north or south. And for a reason, because of course the temperature would be a little bit varied from room to room. We live it, we breathe it, we actually swim through an atmospheric sea from room to room and from place to place. The slightest difference in the composition of this sea would change our way of thinking within a fraction of a second. No developments of our technological age can alter the fact that we are creatures of that atmosphere. Our forefathers and the men of ancient times had no weather maps, but they were, in the actual sense of the word, far more air-minded than we are. I wish I had brought the chapter in Acts where Paul had a shipwreck, but before the shipwreck he could sense by the weather what was going to happen, and he told the men of the vessel what to do, even the sailors, and they were all saved because of it. Many people are surprised when it is pointed out that in chapter 16 of Matthew, There is a favorite of sailormen, a familiar weather saying first spoken by Christ. When it is evening, ye say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. Few appear to be acquainted with that bit of weather lore in the Bible, but most of us know some version or other of the sailor's rhyme. Actually says the same thing in a rhyme. Red sky in the morning is a sailor's sure warning. Red sky at night is the sailor's delight. Folklore is generally frowned upon by scientific men, but many of its sayings and predictions have found scientific backing. The red sunset, mentioned by Christ, for example, was a view of the sun through the dust-laden air that would reach him the next day. In most places, the weather patterns tend to flow from west to east. If tomorrow's air lies westward as a mass of wet stuff, the sun shining through it appears to be a gray or yellowish disk, while if this westward air is dry, the sun appears at its reddest. Even scientific men are impressed by the accurate weather observations made by primitive people. Ancient Navajo blankets and pottery show cloud designs with correct anvil tops and flat bottoms, as accurate as a trained meteorologist could devise today. A few years ago, a group of weathermen decided to test the accuracy of the legend about the caterpillar known to the early pioneers as the woolly bear. The woolly bear was said to be an infallible prophet of winter weather. The wider his middle brown band, the milder the winter. The fact that scientific men put this little bit of folklore to the test is significant, but the fact that the woolly bear is still forecasting winters with great accuracy is even more remarkable. Now, if you remember, some of you that watched that movie or read the book, Love Finds You in Charm, there was a country fair going on, and there was a woolly bear race, and it was a caterpillar race. You might want to watch for that this time and see if you can understand it a little bit better. So I talked a little bit about the weather conditions last time, and I read from The Cottage Core, which is the book that I'm liking, and I thought that I would read something about a nature display. I have shown you before with pictures where I've taken a basket or a bowl and gone for my walk. I've been for my walk today. I've done a 5-minute stretch exercise, gotten prepared, hung out some laundry on the line, and baked a little small bit of bread. And today is going to be quite a big day because I have to get everything out of a bedroom that has a carpet in it that's been there 30 years, and it's time for it to come out, and two of my oldest grandsons are coming tonight to take it out and put a floor in, and it doesn't have a floor, it's on concrete, and so I'm going to have to get all the little things out. They're going to get the furniture out. Excuse me, I dropped my pen, and so it's going to be really messy, but I'm going to try to keep it all in one place, keep the mess in one place. I'm going to get the smaller things out and take some of the drawers out to make it easier to move the bed, and the bed comes apart, which is nice. And so I have been for my walk already, knowing that they're going to come and that my time's going to be taken up with that. So, but I'll sure be glad to get that floor in. Create a nature display, and this is on page 106 of Cottage Core. And if you just want to follow along with me and go on a walk, take a bowl with you and put some nature things in it. We used to do this all the time, you know. We had take some little vessel and fill it with anything. I mean, we could put moss and ferns in it and other things that we would find, rocks, and sit it on the middle of the table, and our mothers just thought it was wonderful. Do you always come back from a walk with your pockets full of unusual stones, twigs, and leaves? If you're stumped for what to do with your finds when you come back home, try making a nature display. I have still some leftover things from a nature display. I have the cutest little feather and some lichen, which is this kind of mossy looking mistletoe type stuff that grows on trees. I have that in a dish, and a shell and a couple of other things. It's great fun sorting through your findings and thinking of fun ways to display them. You could arrange a collection of shells and driftwood from the beach, or place interesting rocks and pebbles in glass jars. There are some beaches that don't let you take the driftwood off of them, although I have had a few pieces. Berry branches and pine cones look striking when arranged in large vases, or can be hung from the ceiling like a giant mobile. Don't limit your display to a table in the corner. Experiment by arranging your treasures in a tray or box, or make a feature of them on a mantelpiece or shelf. This is a great way to reconnect with the wonder of nature, and the beauty of it is that the whole family can get involved. It's probably going to be free. So here are some things to collect. The woodland and countryside, moss, pine cones, hazelnuts, twigs, fallen tree bark, and I'm thinking also chestnuts or oak tree seeds, field maple or sycamore, and acorns. And from the garden, dried sunflower heads, seed pods, dandelion clocks, stones, leaves, petals, squashes, and gourds. And from the beach, shells, dried seaweed, seagull feathers, and several other things they mentioned. So I thought you might enjoy hearing about that and might inspire you to do something like that. We don't really need to go to the expensive florists or anywhere and get things even for our tea parties. I have seen some women do some charming things with things that they just brought in, little branches of things that they brought in from something growing outside of their own house, and they tied it with something, tie it with a string or ribbon for decoration. So now I'm going to read to you from Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet. I like to just include a little bit. I think I've pretty much read the whole book to you, but every now and then a paragraph will stand out to me as something that, well, we could have read it and dwelt on it a little bit more. And it's about a taste for nature. And since I've talked about the weather and the atmosphere and understanding it better, I think that I feel less questioning at home about the atmosphere. Now I'm understanding where it's coming from. And as I told you before about the lady that took the course on how to understand what goes on an airplane flight so she'd be less anxious. Well, it's the same thing with the atmosphere in the home. But if you still don't grasp the atmosphere and you still think something is wrong, just go and clean it up. Clean up something and just perfect it a little bit. Bring in a little bowl of outdoor things, a little display for the middle of a table. See if that helps you at all. So here's the calculation for Austen characters. Morning plus outdoors equal feel good. Because they lived in a world that respected a truth most of us have forgotten. Yeah. Morning plus outdoors equal feel good. Now that was a hard habit for me to get into because I had never done it before. Mostly trying to get through the morning and all the things we do in the morning. Of course, doors all shut, windows all shut. And never venturing outside till afternoon when the mail comes, walking down the road to get that. But now, since reading this book, I see how the Austenites and the Regency people, especially those who lived in more rurally, managed their lives, and it was morning plus outdoors equal feel good. So that's why I've already been on my walk and come in and try to convince myself that it's better than not doing it. Little wonder waking up in dark bedrooms, swigging coffee in dim kitchens, and driving to work in tinted cars would sap the wits out of any Austenites. These are people literally made brighter by a bright morning. Well, I even like it when it's a little bit dark and it's just starting to get light. We are all, in fact, if you are human, you're automatically diurnal, a creature of daylight. To rise with the rhythm of the sun is powerfully built into your biology. Morning light isn't just nice. We need it to stay healthy. It's a symbiotic relationship. As morning light fills the sky, light receptors in our eyes trigger important new day signals in our bodies, keeping our own natural rhythms, heart, brain, metabolism, appetite, weight, mood, energy in proper working order. The sickening effects of jet lag, for instance, is caused when these rhythms are disrupted for only a day. Yet even mild disruptions of morning light will leave us feel like we're hobbling along on the wrong side of a Regency novel. However, getting outside and exposing our eyes to natural morning light immediately tells our brains to stop pumping out melatonin, the hormone responsible for making us feel groggy and dead tired. So I'll continue on that on another time. But we're probably asking the question, if we're supposed to go outside before breakfast or first thing in the morning, how are we ever going to get our housework done? I think, I'm still experimenting. You can be a scientist and you can do your own experiments, and you can experiment with yourself. Keep a little diary. I've got a little book here, and keep it in my apron pocket, and has a pen in it, and I'll write down my observations that on the days that I don't go out, as soon as it's morning, before I start my work, I'll record just how much I got done or how I felt about it or whether I thought the day was successful. I'm wearing an apron today that I got at Hobby Lobby, and these aprons are so pretty. I mean, they're just so, the color and everything, that I felt like after I put it on that I should have another apron to wear over it. I don't want to get this dirty. So it's just for show. But so how are you supposed to get your housework done if you're going to go outside? That's like people who say, I want to get everything done first, and then I will read my Bible and say my prayers. By then, you're so tired, you can't do it. So you need to do what needs to be done first, is that would give you the energy and the inspiration to go and to accomplish something. But everybody's different. But I am trying to get this habit where I go outside first thing. And I have several other friends, young friends, that are trying it too, and we've got something to discuss when we do this. Okay, so now I've done quite a bit already about your appearance and the home and your home life, and now, while you find something else to do, I'm going to discuss a little bit about your personal development and your and also a relationship with people. Now, I did mention to you a friend that I had that wrote a little pioneer book series called Allison on the Oregon Trail, and I want to share with you, if you're a young person, what you could do with something like that. First, you write your story. You get a character or a setting. Your focus can be on the character or it can be on the setting or something else. It doesn't really matter, but you can do many things when you get your series going, when you get your story going. You can take the story and you can do a regular newsletter to update people on the character or things that the character has done or the place. You can also, like, since this is a girl, Allison, she can have her own pioneer fashion show, and you can draw fashions. Now, this is for girls at home that need to learn to be girls, and so you can do that. Now, we got a lot of our sewing ideas when we were young from paper doll making and making paper doll clothes. The design, the colors, got a lot of our ideas, so we knew how to take a page and draw what we wanted to sew and write about it because of that. And so you can also have, like, she could also have the Allison recipe book. What did Allison eat, or what did she prepare, or what? Also her garden book. And remember, I told you last time about how you used to be able to get a little garden diary, and how the young girls really liked that, where they would record what they had planted and what the grid was on the dirt, and other notes about the results. You can have her recipe book, You could just spin off. These are things you could spin off of your own character in a story, and anybody can tell a story, and it can be a very short story, and you can do so many things with one theme or one character. So now you have a storybook, you have a recipe book, you have sewing, maybe a sewing book or a craft book based on that. You can also have a special tea that you make out of something that, some herb or something that you have blended yourself and created your own tea bag. You can also knit or sew something to go with the theme. You can have these all written in a separate book, an activity book that goes with Allison on the Oregon Trail or whoever you're writing about. And you can create a paint kit. I don't know if you knew you could do that. When we were really young, and this is for the young people, what you would do you draw a picture for someone, whether it would be a friend or you put it in a letter or maybe for a little brother or sister or a small child. You draw a picture and then you would put paint, little strips of paint from your watercolor case, if you got it thick enough, and put a little strip of each color on there, and then you would let it dry, and then all they would have to do is dip their brush in water and stroke it on the color, and then fill in their paint by number page that you made for them. Also, you can go on an Allison nature walk and pick up things that she would have picked up. You can make a paper doll house. Make an activity book, and there can also be a diary. Then there are games you could create. Remember, last year I think it was, I put a picture of how to make a board game, your own board game, with your own destiny and your own pieces, just out of scrapbooking papers and all the paraphernalia that comes with that. And you can make a picture map. Have you ever seen a picture map? Well, back in the day when maps first came out, they had pictures in them. It wasn't just like a road map like we see today. They're fascinating. There would be a picture of a castle, where the castle was. There'd be a picture of a cottage, where a cottage was, and they tried to be very accurate, or where animals were seen, or where mountains were. It was all very interesting. And so you can do a map, and you can do many things with this theme. And you can even make your own doll. You could make just many things for this theme, but you can create your own theme. And I think that's one of the beauties of, you start thinking about summer and what you'd like to do for a summer. And I'm going to read in a little bit about Molly of Wives and Daughters and her summer. Dropped my pen again. I'm not going to bother to get it. Okay, so where are we here? We have Wives and Daughters here. And this is my favorite publication, is Wordsworth Editions. I don't know if they've got this. Wordsworth, I don't know if they have the Jane Austen books. I don't have any Jane Austen books. I talk about her a lot and I quote her a lot, but I don't have the books. So I read them online, but I enjoy this edition of Wordsworth books, and I like the picture on the front. Okay, so this is about Molly's Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell, and this is about Molly's stay with Mrs. Hamley. Now remember, she was a girl of 17. I see girls younger than that walking around thinking, what are they going to do when they're 17? Because they're already so worldly and bored with it that they'll be walking along this beautiful countryside with the gorgeous mountains in the background and the fields of wheat in the foreground, and those beautiful cumulus clouds up there, and then the call of these birds, and just the swooping of the swallows, and the way the green grass sparkles in the sun like Easter grass, they call it, and thinking they don't even see it. They're just their eyes are glazed over and they don't even see it. They are not even looking. They're not even aware of it. And so that's why it's so important to teach people when they're very young to have an awareness of the creation around them, so that they will know that they are put here with not put here without a reason and a thought and a purpose, and how precious they are, how precious their minds are, how precious their life is, and how important it is to acknowledge God's creation and His care for us. So here is Molly staying with the Hamleys because Mr. Gibson allowed it, and Mrs. Hamley needed a companion. She had been ill. And Molly had an interesting observation of the Hamley household. She thought it was antique. She thought it was ancient. So even in her time, she thought that and this was probably written around what, 1879 or 1889? Can you imagine us thinking, oh, these people, this is the olden days, but to her, the Hamley household was quite antique-y. She said, so Molly was disappointed about something. She thought, I don't know what it was, she was disappointed. Something that Mr. Hamley had said. So she said, however, in the name of this chapter, this is chapter 7. However, in the never-ending feminine business of the day, Molly soon forgot her own disappointment. It only came back to her on first wakening the next morning, as a vague something that was not quite so pleasant as she had anticipated, and then was banished as a subject of regret. Her days at Hamley were well filled with the small duties that would have belonged to a daughter of the house had there been one. She made breakfast for the lonely squire, and would willingly have carried up Madame's breakfast, but the daily piece of work belonged to the squire and was jealously guarded by him. She read the smaller print of the newspapers aloud to him, city articles, money and corn markets included. She strolled about the gardens with him, gathering fresh flowers, meanwhile, to deck the drawing-room against Mrs. Hamley, and should Mrs. Hamley come down. She was her companion when she took her drives in the close carriage. They read poetry and mild literature together in Mrs. Hamley's sitting-room upstairs. She was quite clever at cribbage now, and could beat the squire if she took pains. Besides these things, there were her own independent ways of employing herself. She used to try to practice an hour daily on the old grand piano in the solitary drawing-room, because she had promised Miss Eyre she would do so. I suppose that was one of her teachers. And she had found her way into the library, and used to undo the heavy bars of the shutters if the housemaid had forgotten this duty, and mount the ladder, sitting on the steps for an hour at a time, deep in some book of an old English classic. The summer days were very short to this happy girl of 17. Yes, what a sweet thing to think about is sitting by a window and reading a book. And oh, I do miss seeing, I don't know what happened to window seats. Perhaps the contractors just forgot to build them, but they used to be very important to us. And if we didn't have one, our fathers would build a box and we'd put some kind of a cushion on it and sit in front of the window with it. It was very important to us, and we would read our books there. So that is another thing you can add to your list of things for young people to learn so they could know how to be young, and the things that would last up until your later years. Now, I discussed with my ladies on Thursday that come here for the ladies' class and the tea a scripture that we read in the Bible. And everybody gets to say something. They all get to observe and to say something about it. But this was it. and it was 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Be sober-minded, be watchful. And I talked about how important it is for ladies, especially ladies of a certain age in their vital years, not to be too silly. It's fun to be with the grandchildren, but not to be goofy all the time, because they don't really need that. They need for us to be grown-ups and to be adults. But it's too many older women are just guffawing and laughing and acting with shallow laughter at every silly thing. And sometimes there are people, this is in the people part that you're all scrolling up to find, because it's 45 minutes now, and that's where it starts. And that is, there are some people you'll find, and I'm not saying any particular age, but they like to lean forward and hang their mood on, someone's going to say something really clever that's going to make me laugh today. And you read about these kind of characters in the old novels. They say, let's go see Miss So-and-so. She's always good for a laugh. And they like to use people for their entertainment. And if you've ever been the victim of that, it can be quite disconcerting. And you wonder, goodness, what could I do to not make these women feel that I am entertaining them with my wonderful humor. And some people don't like to be laughed at or thought of as being a comedian. Nonetheless, if you're any bit of cleverness, and if you do find yourself saying things that are observable or unusual to them, they may just burst out laughing. And I have seen this. There are some people that have a very nervous laugh, and they laugh when they are losing, when they don't know what to say, and when they feel the other person is being ridiculous, or they laugh at every little thing because they are just not certain of themselves. Or I have seen it where they're waiting for someone to say something and they'll laugh at them. And there was one lady I knew that was in a family. I think it was a family, and she caught on to one of the shirt-tail relatives that was doing this, and she says, why is it when I'm in the room, that woman seems to laugh at everything I say? It's always after I say something. So she decided to do an experiment, and she wasn't going to say anything. So she kept a sober look on her face. What I mean by sober means serious-minded. When you see that word sober in the Bible, it's usually translated to be serious-minded and not silly. So she decided to, although she was going to be pleasant, she was going to be very sober and not try to look like she was just lighthearted, too lighthearted, because sometimes all you have to do is be lighthearted and somebody thinks you're funny and they're going to laugh at you. Now, if this has never happened to you, just forget it. Everybody's different, and this might only apply to a very few people who have been the brunt of someone's silly, laughing, constant tittering and guffawing the Bible talks about, where it's this silly, shallow sort of not really a deep, insincere belly laugh, but just silliness. And this lady, now some people don't mind. They don't mind if someone's like that. It doesn't bother them a bit. Other people really want to be taken a little bit more seriously and don't want to be the butt of someone's joke all the time. So they have to be more careful. And so this lady told me, well, I just decided to be very, very conservative with the amount of words that I said. But she noticed that even if she tilted her head and nodded her head and looked interested, she could be laughed at. So eventually she said she tried to avoid that situation where she would be used like that. And so I did warn the ladies with that scripture to be careful not to be overly silly. You can be lighthearted and happy, but as you get older, as you get in your more vital years, it comes across a lot different than if you were a little child. I don't know why that is. They can laugh and they can have fun, and we don't think anything of it, but it somehow doesn't go with the vital years. So we can be happy and we can have a good joke once in a while, but To be constantly silly or with shallow laughter is not very good. Not very good form, I don't think. But of course, everybody's different, and it's up to you whether you want that or not. I am just saying that for those who don't like to be treated like they're a comedian, might be might be wise to figure out a way to come across as being more serious-minded. Now, of course, don't expect to be invited anywhere because they'll say you don't fit in if you're not silly enough. I also discussed last time several things that you could do to make sure that you preserve your time. And this is in the people part because this is what, as you're a homemaker, and even those of you who live alone and have retired, who there are people that will find out that you're not in a 9-to-5 business anymore, and they think that you are more flexible with your time, and you are. They will want you to volunteer for something. They'll want you to do something. They'll want you to join their business. They'll want you to just sell something or just anything. And so what you can do is you can do just like you would if you had a 9-to-5 job, is you get your little book out with all those things you listed that you'd like to do, that you need to do, and just say, I can't fit it in, and I'm working that day. Or I cannot, I just can't fit it in, and I'm all booked up. So I also wanted to talk about if you had felt you had missed out, because I mentioned all these things last time, and one of them was the hope chest. I talked a little bit about that and how it had kind of fallen by the way. And you used to be able to buy the chests. Everyone had one in it. For those of you who missed out on, you could have felt kind of bewildered because you didn't have a hope chest and you weren't given a hope chest, and wondered how would you make up for that. A lot of people that miss out on things feel bad about it for years, but you don't have to. I ran across a site, and I believe her name was Martha Green, and she had written several homemaking books for young people. And I'm not sure it was her, I must say, but someone had written a homemaking book and had said that it wasn't just for young people, just for their future home, but it was for grandmothers too, because they could start a hope chest for someone in their family. And it didn't just include things you need for homemaking, but it could include family mementos, pictures, heirlooms, albums, anything that would be important for tracing your own family, for knowing where you came from and who you were, and knowing who your ancestors were. So you can put any number of things. You can put some homemade thing that one of your relatives made with a note on it. And I know someone who put a handmade trowel that her grandfather had made to dig his seeds in, and just put a little tag on it to tell what the history was and what year it was made. But you can make one for someone else. But you can also prepare your own and put things in it that you like, and just develop, just like the Allison story, just develop a story around this hope chest. And I noticed there was a lot of fiction about hope chests, a lot of pioneer fiction about hope chests. But just kind of look up the word hope chest, and you're going to find, like how to fill a hope chest. And there are several books about them, and I believe someone might have sent me one years ago, and I gave it to one of my children or grandchildren. So I don't know. I can't quite remember what was in it, but I'm going to try to retrieve that. So the other thing, I mentioned a lot of things from last time: homemaking, hospitality, feminine dress, tea time, art, and music, and writing and reading, letter writing, gardening, crafts and sewing, walking, and I don't know if I mentioned the flower press. That was part of our youth as much as it can be part of your vital years. The flower press. It was actually quite a lot of trouble for some people because you had to have nuts and bolts to bolt this wooden flower press together that had corrugated cardboard in between and fancy non-acidic paper to press the flowers with. But there are many other ways to make flower presses. You can use old books, and this was really important because then we would pick up our tweezers and pick up the little petals and leaves and glue these flowers on the corners of letters, and we could write letters with these pressed flowers, dried pressed flowers on them. And that's something that needs to be revived. And so if you are a young person and you want to know how to be young, that is one of them. The other thing is the art easel. Now you can get these little table easels that just sit on the table, and you put your art paper or your art canvas on there and paint something. And one of the ways that I know that this is part of youth is, do you remember when you were allowed to draw your first picture, or when you first got acquainted with drawing? How special that was, and it meant something. It meant you were doing something creative. So you need to paint your own picture, and you need to sing your own song. And here is one more thing that I wanted to cover today, because I had been asked it several times and just didn't know how to answer, but I'm going to go ahead and say something about it. Maybe it will find the right ears and you can say something about it. I might have my ideas, but everybody's different. And that is it. First of all, I want to say that with a group, the conversation is usually different than with an individual. So the things you would say quite honestly to a best friend, a mother, a daughter, you might not want to say in a group. And it will have a different effect on the group, or different people might react differently. Whereas if you said it to one person, you might feel that it is more receptive. And so I wanted to talk about, but this has nothing to do with it, except that you've got to determine whether this is from a group or an individual. When you feel suddenly at a loss of what to say, when someone has said something to you or asked you a question that you were not prepared for, and you don't know where to go with it, and there are people around and you just really don't know how to answer it, and this has been done, this is not new, when you feel suddenly trapped by a question or by something someone has said, or you don't quite know how to answer. I have some ideas for that, and one was that I heard an old man say 40 years ago. Someone had asked him a question that was so pointed and almost designed to trip him, and he hadn't thought about it. So he said something like, I hadn't thought about it. I really don't know what to say. And I always remember that, I don't know what to say. But over the years, those words, I don't know what to say, have been construed as being very, very unintelligent and weak, so no one says that. But this elderly gentleman said, when he was asked this pointed question, I don't know what to say. I don't know. They just don't know. Some people don't want to say anything and they don't want to argue, so they just say, I don't know what to say, and that's okay. The other thing is, you might want to say back to the person, I just would need more time to think about that. I really don't know what to say. And or ask the question back and say, let me know when you have any ideas on it. But sometimes they demand to know something, and it's so digging, and it's so, for instance, we had someone canvassing the neighborhood one time, and they were knocking on doors and asking what we were doing. It was way back before the recycling business got really big, where you could take your containers somewhere and dispose of them. And so we're out here on farms, and everybody has their own way of taking care of the things they don't need, and it was a long time ago. And so somebody came to the door with a clipboard, and they were wanting to know what we did with our empty bottles. And this was long before nobody would even ask a question like that today, because there's a place to take them. And so when we told them what we did with them, that we often refilled them or reused them, or gave them to somebody else, or if they were cracked or ruined, we threw them away or whatever, they'd want to know, where did you throw them? And then why this and why that, until they got so hard to answer that you felt you were being trapped with these questions. And so finally I said, I really don't know what you're looking for, but if you could tell me what you want me to say or what you're trying to do, then I would like to know. Just tell me what it is, because really I would like to cooperate. I'd like to give you the information that you want. But what they were trying to do was trap me into saying something that was environmentally incorrect, and they were going to go ahead and put that down on their clipboard. Now, I don't mind cooperating, because when I grew up on the homestead, we never had anybody have to tell us what to do with things we didn't need anymore, because we used them and grinded them down till they were nothing. Everything was used. Everything was used and reused, and we had a pile of stuff that we put things we didn't want. Other people went through other people's stuff, and it just got cycled and recycled till there's no... I often wondered, some of us came away from our homes with nothing. We didn't even have anything handed down as much as a quilt or a teacup, because these things were just used to death. They just died a natural death and just disintegrated. So that's enough about that. And also I think that we have to teach people to be discreet, meaning the word secret is kind of in that word, discreet. Being careful what they say about your business or other people's business. And particularly, the other day there was a lady who wasn't able to attend services because she wasn't feeling well. And she made the mistake of saying, someone asked her later on, where were you and why weren't you there? And she said, I wasn't feeling well. Well, next thing you know, she's getting all these texts telling her what to take for not feeling well. And, I think that some people just need to rest a little bit more, and if they're not feeling well, just to rest and to leave them alone. But nowadays, when someone is sick, we want them up, get up and, produce or work or something. Why not just let them rest and not pester them about the reasons? And also to be quiet about, if you're related to somebody who's sick, not to spread it around too much, because sometimes they get harassed by other people trying to get them well. And so we just need to be a little more discreet about what we are doing. And also, particularly in the medical field, the first thing someone does when you say you have a headache is they want to tell you what tablet to take or what to do. And everybody's a doctor. Everybody is a therapist. Everybody is this. Everybody's that. And we used to just kind of leave each other alone and pray for them. So, ladies, I'm running out of time, and I've gone way over time. And so I hope that this has been helpful to you, and that you feel better now. I hope you do, and I hope you get a lot done. So thank you all for coming here, because if you didn't come, I wouldn't do this. And this is something I'm also going to give to my descendants, but I'm happy to share it with you too. Some of it might not be any sense to you, and if we were sitting across the table, we wouldn't be able to edit out what each other said, so I don't bother with editing. And if I pronounce something wrong, I'm sorry, you knew what I meant. So ladies, stay close to Christ, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.